I accept your rejection. The hall fell silent, and the Alpha King lost control. The kingdom of Arindor lay in eternal twilight, its skies painted in bruised purples and fading golds, as if the world itself could not decide whether to sleep or wake.
Shadows clung to the walls of the castle like living things, twisting along stone corridors and whispering secrets only the brave or the foolish dared to hear. Within these walls, power and fear danced together, and none commanded them more than Kale, the Alpha King. His presence was a storm held in human form, his dark eyes flickering with a mix of wrath and unspoken longing.
Today, the great hall was crowded.
Nobles, knights, and courtiers lined the polished stone floors, their gowns and tunics glittering with jewels and embroidery. Their voices hummed like bees, careful and cautious, for Kale's temper was legendary. Desperation. Yet even fear could not disguise the anticipation in their hearts. Something important was about to happen. Grasp, something that would shake the delicate balance of loyalty and fear. At the center of the hall stood Lady Seraphine. She was tall, graceful, and unnervingly calm, her pale face framed by hair the color of autumn wheat. Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, scanned the hall as if she were reading each soul like a book. She bore her family's curse quietly, a shadow lurking beneath her skin, waiting to stir. Many whispered that she had powers she could barely control, and that the blood running through her veins carried danger and longing in equal measure. Kill. Entered then, his boots echoing with authority. A hush fell over the crowd. The Alpha of the kingdom, the man who could command fire and shadow, moved like a predator gliding through a cage of prey. His cloak, black as midnight, trailed behind him, and the room seemed to dim further as he approached. Even the torches along the walls bent toward him, casting flickering patterns on his sharp, proud features. He stopped before Seraphine. Their eyes met and the air between them crackled. Not with magic, but with tension, heavy and unyielding. Kale's voice was low, controlled, but each word was sharp enough to draw blood. I summoned you here for your answer, he said. Do you accept what is offered? The hall waited, every noble leaning forward in anticipation. Seraphine's lips pressed into a thin line. She had anticipated this moment, feared it even, yet she faced him with the courage of someone who had wrestled with darkness all her life. I do not, she said, her voice steady, even if her heart beat faster than she wished. I cannot accept you, Kale. It was as if the world itself paused to consider her words. Courtiers gasped softly, exchanging fearful glances. Many had never seen the Alpha King denied, not so openly, not with such unwavering clarity. Kale's eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind their steel-gray depths. For a heartbeat, his hands clenched at his sides, and the shadow of his power seemed to ripple across the hall. The flames along the walls danced higher, casting monstrous shapes that moved as if alive. Then, slowly, Kale bowed his head, a gesture that surprised everyone, including Seraphine. I accept your rejection, he said, his voice calm, almost quiet, but there was a tension beneath it, a coil ready to snap. The hall may fall silent, but my control, my patience, is not yet gone.
He turned and walked away, the sound of his boots leaving a hollow echo.
The courtiers dared not speak, their breaths held tight in their chests. Seraphine felt her own heart pound. She had anticipated relief, perhaps even a sense of triumph, but all she felt was a strange weight settling in her chest. She had rejected him, yes, but in doing so she had awakened something she could not name, a storm that seemed to whisper promises of danger and longing. Outside the hall, the castle itself seemed to shift. Shadows stretched long, curling around corners and staircases. The curse that had lingered in Seraphine's family for generations stirred, sensing the shift in power. It moved like a living thing, slithering through stone and air, whispering in voices only the gifted could hear.
And Seraphine, who had trained her entire life to ignore such things, felt it prick her awareness like cold needles.
Pray. Cale retreated to his private chambers. The room was dark, lit only by a single torch whose flame wavered in the sudden stillness. Duration. He paced, each step measured, controlled, though his mind raged like fire. He had not expected rejection, not so calm, so unwavering. His alpha nature, the part of him that demanded dominance and control, twisted and churned. Yet beneath the surface a different feeling stirred, one he could not name. Breath. Regret, longing, aspiration. Perhaps both mingling with something darker, something dangerous. Alone, he closed his eyes, trying to steady the storm within. Aspiration. The shadows in the corners of the room began to twist unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed almost human. A voice whispered from the darkness, low and serpentine, threading through his thoughts. Aspiration. Duh. You are weaker than you believe, it hissed. And yet stronger than you dare imagine. One will fall, one will rise. But the choice is never yours alone. Cale's eyes snapped open. He could not see a figure, yet the presence was undeniable, as if the castle itself breathed judgment upon him. He clenched his fists, refusing to surrender to fear, refusing to let the whisper know even a fraction of his doubt. Meanwhile, Seraphine walked the halls in quiet contemplation. She felt the shift in the air, the stirring of her own magic, and the shadow of Cale lingering in her thoughts. She had expected anger, perhaps a show of wrath, but instead she had seen a flicker of vulnerability in him. Vulnerability, though fleeting, was dangerous. And in her heart, she felt an unfamiliar pull, a longing she had fought to deny for years. As the night deepened, the castle seemed alive with anticipation. Whispers carried through stone corridors, shadows moved with purpose, and the weight of what had just occurred pressed on every soul within the walls. No one dared speak openly of Cale's acceptance of rejection, for fear that even words might summon the storm that lay coiled within him.
In her chambers, Seraphine lit a single candle and sat by the window, staring out at the endless twilight.
Her mind replayed the moment in the hall, Cale's words echoing in her thoughts. I accept your rejection, but my control is not yet gone. She wondered what that truly meant. Was it merely a statement of patience or a warning of the darkness yet to come? Sudden chill filled the room. The candle flickered, and for a moment she saw her own shadow stretch unnaturally, twisting as if reaching for something beyond her control. The curse that had haunted her bloodline stirred, whispering of trials, choices, and sacrifices yet to come. Seraphine shivered, not from fear, but from the strange mix of excitement and dread that only destiny can summon. Far below, in the deepest dungeons of the castle, something stirred. Ancient chains rattled, and a faint hum of energy pulsed through the stone walls. The castle had long been home to secrets older than the kingdom itself, and now, in the wake of Cale and Seraphina's confrontation, those secrets were beginning to wake. Cale, pacing alone in his chambers, felt a pressure on his chest unlike any he had known.
The alpha in him bristled, demanding control, demanding victory, but another part, quieter, insistent, urged caution.
He could feel the pull of Seraphine even from a distance, a tether of power and emotion binding them in ways he could not yet understand.
He finally stopped before the window, looking out over the kingdom he ruled with both strength and fear. The twilight sky reflected in his eyes, a mirror of the storm within him. The hall had fallen silent, yes, but the silence was not peace. It was the quiet before a tempest, one that would test the limits of power, courage, and perhaps even the heart itself, Parade. And somewhere in the twisting shadows of the castle the whisper came again, softer this time. Almost a promise. Soon, all will be revealed, and not all will survive the truth of the heart. Kao clenched his fists once more, feeling the weight of what was coming. For the first time in his life, he wondered if even he, King, Alpha, Master of Shadow and Fire, could survive what destiny had set in motion. Perhaps. Seraphine, in her chambers, closed her eyes, sensing the same whisper, the same pull of something beyond understanding. She had rejected him, yes, but neither of them could deny the invisible thread that now connected them, a thread that would tug them toward danger, toward longing, toward a truth that neither was fully ready to face.
The night stretched on, heavy, uncertain.
The kingdom of Arendor waited in silence, and the Alpha King, once invincible in his pride and control, felt the first stirrings of a storm he could not command. The hall had indeed fallen silent, but outside its walls the shadows were already moving, and the game of power, longing, and destiny had only just begun. The castle of Arendor was quieter than usual in the days following the hall's confrontation. Courtiers moved with a measured caution, as if each step might awaken the storm lurking in Kael's mind. Yet the shadows themselves seemed restless. They stretched longer in corridors, twisted unnaturally along walls, and occasionally gathered at corners like silent witnesses. Kael did not sleep much. He spent nights pacing his chambers, listening to the faint hum of the castle and the whispers of shadows that only he could sense. His pride demanded control, yet he could not deny the weight of Seraphine's rejection pressing on him, haunting him. Even in his solitude, her presence lingered, a ghost of light and fire that unsettled his carefully maintained authority. He remembered the hall in vivid detail, the silence that followed her words, the way her gaze had not faltered, the calm certainty in her voice. "I do not accept you, Kael." The memory was like a spark striking tinder. It ignited a storm inside him, one he could not name. Anger, perhaps. Hurt? Certainly. And beneath it all a feeling he had long buried. Longing. It was a dangerous thing, one he had no right to feel for anyone. Yet there it was, insistent and real. Meanwhile, Seraphine moved through the castle with quiet purpose. The rejection had not left her heart unscathed. She had anticipated relief, perhaps even triumph, but she felt no such thing. Instead, there was a hollow tension, a recognition that the moment had shifted something fundamental. Kael's power, his presence, and the vulnerability she had glimpsed all mingled in her thoughts. She had spent her life fearing the curse that haunted her family, yet Kael himself now seemed like a storm she could not escape. One evening, drawn by the stirrings of her own magic, Seraphine entered the lesser halls of the castle, corridors that few dared to traverse. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of stone and old enchantments. She could feel the curse in subtle pulses, a rhythm that mirrored her own heartbeat. Something had awakened, a force older than the kingdom itself responding to the confrontation in the great hall. As she rounded a corner, she almost collided with Kael. Neither had expected the other to be here, and for a brief moment time seemed to pause. "You should not be here," Kael said, his voice low and controlled, though the undercurrent of emotion betrayed him. "I could say the same of you," Seraphine replied, her eyes steady, though her pulse quickened. This castle is full of shadows. Inspiration. They are mine to sense as well. Kyle's gaze lingered on her, a mixture of warning and something softer he did not wish to name. Bear. Be careful, Seraphine. Curiosity has a way of drawing more than answers. Brrr. I am not afraid, she said, though her hands itched to touch the faint glow of her own power. Not of shadows. Not of curses. Not even of you. Inspiration. Kael's jaw tightened. Her defiance both infuriated and captivated him. Brr. He wanted to assert control, to dominate the moment as he had done countless times before. But every instinct told him that she was not someone who could be controlled. And perhaps, he admitted silently, he did not wish to. The shadows in the hallway shifted, curling around him as if drawn to their tension. Suddenly a chill ran through the air, and a faint whisper stirred in Seraphine's ears. Bird. The curse, she realized, was responding to something, perhaps to the bond that was forming between them, perhaps to the lingering rejection that had so unsettled Kale. Before either could speak further, a hall of statues at the end of the corridor seemed to tremble. The stone figures were ancient knights and nobles, frozen in poses of judgment and authority. Yet now their eyes gleamed faintly with an unnatural light, and their stone mouths appeared to whisper warnings that only the gifted could hear. Inspiration. Kale's hand moved instinctively toward his sword. Though it was more than steel he wielded, it was the alpha energy within him, the control of fire and shadow. Free. His power surged, brushing against the edges of the curse, trying to assert dominance over forces that were older than even his lineage. Step back, he warned Seraphine, his voice sharp. Do not interfere. I will not, she said, stepping closer instead. But you cannot do this alone. Inspiration. Not here. Not now. Inspiration. Kale froze, surprised by her courage. She was not asking him to yield, not asking him to submit. She was offering partnership, an acknowledgement that power alone was not enough. Inspiration. Together, they could face this, or so she suggested without words. The shadows reacted violently, flaring with sudden black fire that licked the edges of the corridor. Brrrr. Kale barely restrained himself from unleashing a counterstrike. Seraphine's hands glowed faintly, and she reached toward the shadows, her voice a whisper of command that was more felt than heard. The black fire recoiled, hissing and curling like a living thing, as if recognizing her strength. Kale watched, fascinated despite himself. Bird. She was a force he had underestimated, her control over her own power subtle but undeniable. He realized then that their conflict was not merely between them. It was within them, a struggle of pride, fear, and desire, complicated further by the ancient forces that had awakened around them. Why do you fight it? He asked quietly, stepping closer, careful not to let the shadows sense his movement. I fight only what must be fought, she replied. Inspiration. And I fight to protect what cannot defend itself. Kale's chest tightened. Her words echoed in him, striking chords he had long silenced. The need to protect, the need to connect, the need to trust someone beyond his own power. He had never been vulnerable, never allowed another to pierce the walls of his mind or heart. And now, Seraphine was doing exactly that, uninvited and unstoppable.
The shadows shivered again, sensing the unspoken bond forming between them.
The air grew thick, heavy with power and longing, and for the first time Kale felt a tremor of fear, not for himself, but for her.
Before either could respond further, a distant sound echoed through the castle, the low metallic hum of chains dragging across stone.
The dungeons below, long dormant, were stirring. Seraphine stiffened, her eyes narrowing. The curse was awakening fully now, and its power was no longer subtle. We need to leave, she said, her voice firm, yet tinged with unease. The curse is stronger than we thought. It will not wait for caution. Kale's gaze met hers, and for a long moment, nothing needed to be said. They moved together through the corridor, steps in sync, a tentative alliance forming in the shadows.
The castle seemed to bend around them, corridors twisting unnaturally, as if aware of the partnership now present.
As they reached a quieter wing of the castle, KL spoke, his voice low.
You should have stayed away from me. From all of this. I am no one to trust, Seraphine. You are stronger than you think, she replied.
Stronger than your pride tells you. And yet you are not invincible.
No one is. Her words struck him like a blade he could not see. He had ruled through fear and respect, through strength and dominance, yet her calm certainty challenged all of it. For the first time he questioned his own methods, his own instincts, and perhaps even the path he had chosen. The corridors ahead darkened, and a distant light flickered, an unnatural glow, faint but unmistakable. The curse was calling to them, drawing them closer to a confrontation neither fully understood. Kale's hand brushed against Seraphine's arm instinctively, a gesture of both warning and reassurance. She did not pull away. Together, then? He asked quietly.
She nodded. Together.
But cautiously.
The shadows are older than us.
Breath. They will test everything we think we know. They move forward, the faint glow ahead growing stronger, revealing the first hints of the hall where the curse was strongest. Destinations line the walls, twisted by time and magic, their eyes following every step. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with energy that made their hearts beat faster. Cal glanced at her, and for a moment, all his control wavered. His pride, his alpha nature, even his fear of vulnerability, all of it collided inside him. Yet Seraphine's presence was steady, grounding, challenging him to face not just the curse but his own heart. The shadows shifted violently, and a sudden pulse of energy threw them both back. Dust and debris scattered, and Kale instinctively threw a shield of shadow around them. Seraphine rose gracefully, her magic flaring in response. Together they stood side by side, the first true partnership forming between them, bound by necessity, fear, and an unspoken connection neither could yet define. As the pulse faded, the castle fell eerily silent. The glow ahead pulsed again, and Kale knew that whatever lay beyond that hall would test them both. Strength, control, and heart. Neither could retreat now. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than either had imagined. Kale's gaze lingered on Seraphine, and for a heartbeat the alpha in him lost control, not of power, but of his own unspoken emotions. She met his eyes, unwavering, unafraid, and in that moment he knew the path ahead would not be one of dominance alone. It would require trust, sacrifice, and perhaps even surrender. The castle itself seemed to hold its breath as they stepped toward the glowing hall. The shadows danced along the walls, whispering secrets and warnings, and the curse stirred more deeply than ever. Somewhere, in the deepest corners of the stone corridors, a voice whispered just for them, "Those who walk together must face the darkness within, or be consumed by it." Kale tightened his fists, and Seraphine's magic shimmered faintly in response. Side by side they moved forward, knowing the next confrontation would change everything. The shadows between them were thick, alive, and dangerous. Yet within those shadows a spark had begun. A spark neither had expected, one that threatened to ignite more than just the castle around them. The game had begun, and nothing would be the same again. The castle of Arindor had changed. Twilight no longer rested quietly in the skies. It roared in streaks of violet and crimson, as if the heavens themselves reflected the turmoil within the stone walls. Fires unnatural in hue burned along the outer battlements, their smoke curling toward the clouds. The castle had become a living thing, shifting and twisting in response to the stirring of the curse, the tension between Kale and Seraphine, and the echoes of powers far older than the kingdom itself. Kale had not slept for nights. The rejection in the hall, though publicly accepted, gnawed at him in secret. It was not pride alone that twisted in his chest. It was a growing awareness that Seraphine was no ordinary woman, and that his alpha strength, his control, his dominance, his command over fire and shadow was insufficient to understand or possess her. He paced the corridors with restless energy, his shadow stretching like a living thing along the cold stone walls. Meanwhile, Seraphine moved with purpose through the castle, her own magic simmering faintly beneath her skin. She had spent her life learning control over herself, over the curse that ran through her veins, but the events of the hall and the pulse of the castle had awakened something new. Her power responded not just to fear or danger, but to Kale himself, a tether that neither could name nor deny. She sensed him in every corridor, every shadow, every flicker of the candlelight. And though she had rejected him, she could not deny the bond that had begun to form. Fragile, yet insistent. That evening, drawn by whispers only she could hear, Seraphine descended into the lower halls of the castle. The shadows here were older, deeper, alive with intent. Stone corridors twisted unnaturally, as if the castle itself sought to test her, to challenge her courage. Kale followed silently behind, feeling her presence as clearly as if it were a heartbeat. He did not call out, did not demand her attention. He simply moved, watching her, waiting, learning. They reached a vast hall where the curse's power was strongest. Statues of ancient kings and queens lined the walls, their stone faces frozen in expressions of judgment.
The air was thick with energy, each breath heavy as though carrying the weight of centuries. A faint glow emanated from the center, pulsing like a heartbeat.
Kale felt it in his bones, an energy older than any power he commanded, an ancient magic that could not be subdued by strength alone. Kale, Seraphine said softly, stepping closer to the glow. Her voice carried both caution and quiet authority. This is the heart of the curse. If we do not approach it together, we will fail.
Kale's eyes darkened, and for a moment he felt the alpha within him surge. To him, control was everything.
Yet as he looked at Seraphine, standing steady and strong in the face of forces that might unmake them both, he realized control alone would not save them. He nodded. Together, he said, the word heavy with intent, binding them as allies and, unknowingly, something more.
As they approached the glowing heart of the hall, the shadows around them stirred violently.
The air pulsed with energy, and the statues seemed to lean forward, eyes gleaming as if alive. The curse demanded attention, demanded acknowledgement, demanded sacrifice. Kale felt the pull of his own darkness, the raw power that had made him king, alpha, ruler of shadow and fire. Yet even he could sense that this was not a battle for dominance. It was a test of heart, of courage, of the willingness to surrender and trust. The first trial came swiftly. Shadows coalesced into forms, each one reflecting a fear within them. For Cal, the shadows became a version of himself. Cold, untouchable, ruthless, a king who had loved nothing and no one but power. For Seraphine, the shadows became visions of destruction, her family's curse consuming those she cared for, her own power spiraling beyond control. The hall vibrated with energy, and the pulse of the curse quickened. Kale stepped forward first, Beration. His voice, steady despite the storm within, spoke to the shadows.
I am not afraid, he said.
The shadows shifted but did not dissipate. He realized then that words alone would not be enough. Beration. Strength, yes, but strength tempered by humility, by vulnerability, was required. He let the fire within him flare, not to destroy, but to illuminate, to anchor himself in the present. Seraphine followed, her magic flaring in harmony with his. She did not command the shadows with force. She guided them, channeling her fear and her power into a controlled current that met Kale's energy and balance. Together they became a conduit not of dominance but of unity. The shadows writhed, then paused, then slowly receded, acknowledging the bond between them, fragile and untested, yet undeniable. Kale looked at her, breath catching. You are stronger than I imagined, he admitted quietly, a rare vulnerability touching his voice. Seraphine met his gaze without flinching.
And you are not just a king, she said.
You are more than your strength, Kale. But you have much to learn about trust. The words struck him with more force than any shadow or flame could. He had ruled through fear and respect for decades, yet here, in the face of something older than his power, he realized that authority alone was meaningless. Trust was a weapon he had never wielded, and yet in that moment he felt its weight, its danger, and its necessity. Suddenly, the glow in the center of the hall intensified. The pulse became a roar, and the floor beneath them trembled. A figure emerged from the heart of the glow, indistinct but human in shape, cloaked in shadows that seemed alive. Its voice was a whisper carried on the air, yet it struck both Kale and Seraphine with clarity.
Only one may walk free, it said. One must sacrifice. One must surrender.
Only then will the curse be broken. Kale's hand instinctively moved toward her, a protective gesture, though he knew instinct alone could not save them. We will face this together, he said firmly.
Whatever it asks, we do it together. Seraphine's gaze softened. I will not let you face this alone, she replied. And yet, it may ask more than we can give.
The figure from the heart of the curse stepped closer, and the hall itself seemed to bend, walls twisting, statues leaning forward, the ceiling trembling. Kale felt the pull of something within him, fear, desire, doubt, all mingling into a force that threatened to overwhelm him. He clenched his fists, drawing upon the alpha energy that had defined him for so long, but this was different. The challenge was not external. It was internal. He had to confront himself, the parts he had hidden even from the world. The shadows around them thickened, pressing in. Kale and Seraphine felt their connection strain and stretch. The bond they had formed tested by forces beyond comprehension. Seraphine raised her hands, channeling her power not outward but inward, anchoring them both, drawing strength from the unity that had begun to form. Trust me, she said softly. Trust us. Kale swallowed, the words unfamiliar and yet necessary. He nodded, letting go of the pride and the rigid control that had always defined him. He stepped closer to her, their energies merging, and together they faced the shadows. The hall erupted in light and shadow, a storm of magic, fear, and power. The figure from the curse watched, its voice rising and falling in resonance with the energy around them. Kale felt his heart pound, his chest tight, the weight of his own darkness pressing against him.
Yet Seraphine's presence was steady, grounding, reminding him that he was not alone. Hours seemed to pass in moments. Birth. The trial demanded that each confront their deepest fears. Cale faced visions of failure, of losing everything he ruled and loved. Seraphine faced visions of corruption, of her power spiraling out of control, of her family lost forever. Yet side by side, they endured. Each glance, each touch, each word whispered across the hall strengthened their resolve. The Alpha who had once ruled through fear now led through courage. The woman who had always feared her own power now embraced it fully, with trust and guidance. Finally, the figure from the curse spoke one last time.
You have faced yourselves and each other. You have chosen unity over dominance, trust over pride.
The curse yields. Oh. The glow in the hall dimmed, shadows retreating into corners, statues resuming their frozen postures. The pulse of the curse slowed, but it remained, a reminder that this was not the end, only a test. Cale and Seraphine stood together, exhausted yet unbroken, their bond solidified in ways neither had anticipated. Cale reached for Seraphine's hand, hesitated, then held it firmly. We survived this together, he said.
But I know this is only the beginning. She nodded, her own strength returning, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of magic that still lingered. The beginning of what? She asked quietly.
Cale's jaw tightened. Of a war not just for the kingdom, but for ourselves. For what we might be together.
We have faced the curse, yes, but the shadows are far from gone, and neither of us will be the same again. For the first time, Cale allowed himself to feel vulnerability, a flicker of longing he could not deny. Seraphine met it not with fear, but with understanding. And in that shared gaze, something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a warning, a possibility that neither could yet name. Outside, the castle shivered, as if alive, the wind carrying whispers of prophecy and caution. The curse had retreated, but it had left a seed behind. Cale and Seraphine would need to confront it again, together, but the bond they had forged in the crucible of fear and shadow had changed them both. The breaking of the Alpha was not just a test of power, it was a test of heart. And in that moment, Cale realized that strength alone could not protect the kingdom, the people, or even himself. Only trust, and perhaps love, could endure. The hall fell silent once more. Yet beyond the walls the curse stirred, watching, waiting, reminding them that the next trial would be harder, deeper, and more dangerous than anything they had faced.
Cale tightened his hand around Seraphine's. She did not flinch.
Together they stepped from the hall, aware that the shadows between them had shifted, that their bond had been tested and strengthened, and that the next challenge would demand even more than courage. It would demand transformation. The Alpha had been broken. And in that breaking, something new had begun. The twilight sky over Arendor had darkened to a bruised violet, streaked with silver clouds that seemed to shimmer with the power of the unseen. The castle trembled faintly under the pulse of the ancient curse, which had not been defeated but contained, held, temporarily at bay, by the courage and unity of Cale and Seraphine. Yet the air was heavy with anticipation, as if the very stones whispered of a trial that would demand more than power, more than courage. It would demand heart. Cale stood at the entrance to the shadow chamber, the deepest and most dangerous hall in the castle. Its doors, carved from black stone veined with crimson, pulsed faintly as though alive, and the shadows within writhed and twisted, responding to the stirrings of the curse. His hand rested on the cold stone, and for the first time he felt hesitation. Alpha instincts, pride, and the weight of a kingdom pressed upon him, but beneath that an unfamiliar vulnerability shimmered for it. He was not invincible. He was not untouchable. And for the first time in his life, he did not want to face what lay beyond the doors alone. Seraphine emerged from the corridor behind him, her pale face calm, her golden hair catching the fading light. Inspiration. She did not speak immediately. She merely regarded him with steady eyes, her presence grounding him, reminding him that he was not alone. The pull between them, quiet but undeniable, had grown since their last trial. Each shared glance, each subtle touch, had woven a tether between them, one stronger than any magic in the castle. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. Cale's jaw tightened. "I never wanted to face it alone," he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But the choice, the curse, it tests more than strength. It will show what is inside us, everything we try to hide."
Seraphine nodded, stepping closer.
Then we face it together. Not as king and lady, not as ruler and subject, but as two who are willing to trust each other. Only then can the curse be broken. He looked at her, the words both frightening and comforting. Trust, something Cale had never allowed himself, was a dangerous thing. But Seraphine, steady and fearless, offered it willingly. The alpha in him resisted, yet another part, deeper, quieter, longed for it, for her. Together, they pushed open the doors. The shadow chamber was unlike anything either had seen. Its walls were alive with darkness, flickering with the images of ancient rulers, their faces twisted in warning and judgment. The floor seemed to breathe beneath their feet, rising and falling as if the hall itself were a living being. Shadows twisted into forms that resembled fear itself, memories, regrets, visions of failure and loss. The air was thick, charged with magic older than the kingdom, pressing on their minds, their hearts, their very souls. The first wave of the curse struck immediately. Shadows surged forward, taking shape as visions of their deepest fears. Cale faced himself, a king consumed by pride, who had lost everything he loved to arrogance and rage. Seraphine faced herself, a woman powerless against her family's curse, whose strength might destroy everything she cared for if uncontrolled. Both were forced to confront the truth of themselves, reflected in forms more vivid and merciless than any ordinary mirror. Cale's first instinct was to fight, to dominate, to assert control, as he always had. But the shadow twisted, reflecting not his enemies but his own flaws. Fire and shadow alone could not destroy it. He stumbled, faltered under the weight of his own self-doubt, and for the first time fear coursed through him. Seraphine's voice reached him across the hall.
"You are not alone," she called, her magic shimmering like a beacon. "Let go of control."
Face it with me. Together.
He hesitated, every part of him rebelling against the idea of surrender, and yet her presence, steady and unwavering, anchored him.
He extended his hand, and hers met it. The moment their fingers touched, their combined energy flared outward, a force of balance between fire and light, shadow and control. The hall reacted instantly, shadows pausing, as if unsure how to respond to a bond stronger than fear. Together they moved into the heart of the chamber. The shadows tested them again, striking harder, more personally. Cale saw visions of Seraphine harmed, of the kingdom falling under his failure. Seraphine saw Cale losing himself to pride and rage, his power consuming him before it could save anyone. Each vision was a knife to the heart, demanding choice and courage.
Kale's voice shook, but he did not withdraw.
Desperation. I cannot protect you unless we face this together, he admitted.
I am afraid of losing what I cannot control.
You do not need to control me, Seraphine replied, her hand tightening around his. You only need to trust. Desperation. Trust us! Trust yourself! Burr. Their bond, unspoken yet undeniable, became their weapon. The shadows recoiled, twisted, and then began to dissolve, retreating into the corners of the chamber. Burr. The curse pulsed one final time, a low, rumbling growl that echoed like thunder. Then the figure at the center of the glow emerged, less shadowed now, more human. Great. Its voice resonated across the hall. You have faced yourselves and each other. You have chosen trust over fear, unity over dominance.
The curse yields, but only for those who remain true.
Desperation. Kyle exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave his body in part. His alpha instincts were quieted, not gone, but tempered. He looked at Seraphine and saw not only courage but understanding, wisdom, and the quiet promise of partnership. The glow dimmed and the shadows retreated fully, leaving the chamber bathed in faint silver light. The danger was not gone, but it had been contained, mitigated by their courage, trust, and mutual strength. They had faced the heart of the curse and survived. Kale stepped closer to Seraphine, his voice barely above a whisper.
You have changed me, he admitted.
Not with words, not with force, but simply by being here, by being you. Desperation.
Seraphine's eyes softened, reflecting the silver light. And you have changed me, she said.
You have shown me that strength is not only power. It is trust, courage, and the willingness to face yourself. For the first time in many years, KL allowed himself to feel vulnerability without fear.
He reached for her hand, holding it gently yet firmly. Seraphine did not withdraw. Instead, she leaned slightly into him, an acknowledgement of connection, trust, and the bond forged in the trials they had endured. The castle itself seemed to sigh, the ancient stones responding to their union of heart and will. Twilight outside began to lift slightly, as if acknowledging that for this moment at least, light and shadow could coexist. Yet even as they stood together, the remnants of the curse whispered in corners unseen.
It had been mitigated, yes, but not destroyed entirely.
The trials of the future would be different, more subtle, more insistent. But Kale and Seraphine had learned the most important truth. That alone they were strong, but together they could endure anything. Kale turned to her, his expression softer than any subject or night had ever seen. Seraphine. Whatever comes next. Whatever shadows return, we face it together. Not as king and noble, not as ruler and subject, but as equals. As something more. Seraphine's lips curved in a faint smile, and she met his gaze without hesitation. Yes, KL. Together. Whatever comes, we face it together. For a long moment, neither spoke. The chamber was silent save for the faint pulse of magic lingering in the air, a heartbeat that mirrored their own. In that silence, a quiet understanding passed between them, a recognition of shared strength, trust, and perhaps a love that neither had dared to name before.
Outside the chamber, the kingdom seemed to exhale. Fires burned with steadier light. Shadows settled into corners, and the castle itself seemed calmer.
The trials had left marks, yes, but also lessons. Strength tempered by trust, pride softened by vulnerability, and power balanced with compassion. Kale and Seraphine stepped out of the shadow chamber side by side. The corridors of the castle, once twisted and threatening, now seemed to acknowledge their bond, their courage, and the transformation they had undergone. Nobles and knights who had waited anxiously in the wings looked upon them with a mix of awe and relief. The Alpha King who had once ruled through fear now carried a new authority, the quiet, undeniable strength of someone tempered by love, trust, and humility. Seraphine walked slightly ahead, her confidence radiant, her steps steady. Ko followed, not behind in distance, but behind in protection, willing to shield her not out of dominance, but out of care. Their bond, forged in shadow, strengthened by trial and tempered by trust, had become unbreakable. The sky over Enda began to lighten, a faint silver breaking through the violet twilight. It was not the dawn of an ordinary day. It was the dawn of transformation, for the kingdom, for the castle, and for the hearts of Kale and Seraphine. The curse had been mitigated, their bond solidified, and their journey had only just begun. Yet even as the light spread, the whispers of prophecy lingered, soft and almost imperceptible. Even love cannot tame all darkness. Some trials are eternal. Some kings may never be free. Kyle squeezed Seraphine's hand gently. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we endure it together." Seraphine nodded, her eyes reflecting courage, hope, and a quiet spark of something deeper. "Together," she echoed. "Right." And so, side by side, they walked into the halls of Arendor, their bond stronger than any shadow, their hearts transformed, ready to face the unknown. The Alpha King had been broken, and in that breaking, they had both found a new beginning.